Welcome to my channel StarWire Daily. Please share and subscribe and press the bell icon for new updates. Picture this. It's 1999 and Brendan Fraser is standing on top of the world. The Mummy has just shattered box office records, making him Hollywood's newest action hero. He's charming, he's talented, and he's everywhere. Fast forward to 2009, and Brendan Fraser has virtually vanished from our screens. What happened to the man who once commanded $20 million paychecks? The answer is darker than any of his adventure films. It's a story that Hollywood desperately tried to bury. Tonight, we're diving deep into one of Tinseltown's most shocking cover-ups, a tale of power, abuse, and a career systematically destroyed by the very industry that made him a star. This isn't just about one man's fall from grace. This is about a system that protects predators and silences victims, regardless of how famous they are. You think you know Brendan Fraser's story? Think again. Let's start where it all began to crumble. The year was 2003, and Fraser was attending a Hollywood Foreign Press Association luncheon. You know, the people behind the Golden Globes. It should have been just another industry schmooze fest. But for Brendan, it became the day that changed everything. Philip Burke, the former president of the HFPA, approached Fraser in the crowded Beverly Hills hotel. What happened next would haunt the actor for over a decade. In Fraser's own words, which he wouldn't share publicly until 2018, Burke reached out to shake his hand, and then his other hand went somewhere it absolutely should not have gone. The assault was brief but devastating. Fraser froze, removed Burke's hand, and stumbled out of the room in shock. He felt like a little kid, he later revealed. He told his then-wife, Afton, immediately, but the shame was overwhelming. This was 2003, remember, the hashtag #MeToo movement was still years away. Male victims of sexual assault? The industry didn't want to hear about it. But here's where the story gets truly sinister. Fraser, through his representatives, demanded a written apology from Burke. And you know what? He got one. The HFPA quietly acknowledged the incident internally, which means they knew. They knew their president had sexually assaulted one of Hollywood's biggest stars, and they did nothing. Well, that's not entirely true. They did something, all right. They made sure Brendan Fraser paid the price. Almost immediately, Fraser noticed the freeze-out. The Golden Globes? He was never invited back. The Hollywood Foreign Press Association, which had previously courted him for interviews and events, went silent. And in an industry where relationships are everything, where a single organization's approval can make or break careers, this was devastating. But the blacklisting went deeper than just the HFPA. Word travels fast in Hollywood, and somehow the message got out. Brendan Fraser was trouble. He was difficult. He was making waves. The whispers followed him from studio to studio, from casting director to casting director. The timing couldn't have been worse. This was right when Fraser should have been at his peak. The Mummy Returns had been another massive hit in 2001. He was set to continue the franchise, had other action films in development. But suddenly, the phone stopped ringing for the big blockbusters. The leading man roles started going to other people. And Fraser? He began to spiral. The psychological impact was immediate and brutal. Fraser later described falling into a deep depression. He felt like he was disappearing, both professionally and personally. The confident, larger-than-life performer who had charmed audiences in films like George of the Jungle and The Mummy was replaced by someone barely hanging on. His marriage to Afton Smith, already strained by the pressures of Hollywood life, began to deteriorate. The couple, who had seemed like the perfect Hollywood family with their 3 sons, started having very public problems. And when you're dealing with trauma, when your career is imploding, when you're struggling just to get out of bed in the morning, well, personal relationships suffer. The divorce proceedings that began in 2007 became another nightmare entirely. The settlement was astronomical, $900,000 a year in alimony, based on Fraser's peak earning years when he was making $25 million per film. But those days were long gone. By the time the divorce was finalized in 2009, Fraser was barely working. Imagine having to pay nearly $1 million a year when Hollywood has essentially blacklisted you. Imagine the pressure, the desperation, the feeling that you're trapped in a system designed to destroy you. But the cruelest irony? Fraser kept taking jobs, any jobs he could get, just to meet those crushing financial obligations. B-movies, straight-to-DVD releases, television guest spots. Each role a reminder of how far he'd fallen, each paycheck barely keeping him afloat. And his body? It was falling apart too. This is where Fraser's story becomes even more heartbreaking. All those years of doing his own stunts, of throwing himself into physically demanding roles, had taken their toll. He needed multiple surgeries on his back, his knees, his vocal cords. At one point, he had to have part of his spine fused. The man who had once been the epitome of athletic Hollywood leading men was literally being held together by medical interventions. The procedures meant months of recovery time, during which he couldn't work even if someone had offered him a job. It was a vicious cycle. He needed to work to pay his bills, but his body wouldn't let him work, and Hollywood wasn't calling anyway. Friends from the industry later revealed just how bad things got. Fraser would show up to the few meetings he could get looking gaunt, clearly in physical pain, and emotionally exhausted. The spark that had made him a star was dimming, and everyone could see it. But here's what makes this story so infuriating. Fraser never publicly complained. He never threw anyone under the bus. He never played the victim, even though he absolutely was one. He just disappeared, quietly, professionally, like the good soldier Hollywood expected him to be. For years, the official narrative was that Brendan Fraser had simply chosen to step away from the spotlight, that he was taking a break, focusing on his family, maybe just tired of the Hollywood grind. Some outlets suggested he'd gotten too comfortable, that success had made him lazy or difficult to work with. The truth was so much darker. While Fraser was struggling in obscurity, Philip Burke continued to thrive. He remained in his position with the HFPA, continued to wield enormous influence over one of Hollywood's most important awards shows, continued to have access to the industry's biggest stars. The man who had assaulted Brendan Fraser faced no consequences whatsoever. This is the part that should make your blood boil. Because it wasn't just about Fraser anymore. How many other actors, how many other industry professionals had similar experiences with Burke or others like him? How many careers were ended or derailed by powerful men who knew they could act with impunity? Fraser's blacklisting sent a chilling message throughout Hollywood. Speak up about abuse, and you'll pay the price. It didn't matter how famous you were, how much money you'd made for the studios, how beloved you were by audiences. Cross the wrong people, and you're done. The psychological warfare was sophisticated and brutal. No one officially said Fraser was blacklisted. There was no memo, no explicit instructions. But somehow, mysteriously, he stopped getting offered the roles that should have been perfect for him. Somehow, casting directors stopped thinking of him for leading man parts. Somehow, his agent stopped getting the calls. This is how Hollywood's power structure really works. It's not about talent or box office appeal or even audience demand. It's about who you know, who you've pleased, and, crucially, who you've crossed. Fraser learned this lesson in the most painful way possible. But even in his darkest moments, Fraser continued to work on smaller projects. He appeared in independent films, took supporting roles in bigger productions when he could get them. He did voice work. He kept showing up, kept trying, even when it seemed like the entire industry had turned its back on him. And slowly, very slowly, people began to notice. The first signs of a potential comeback came around 2016 and 2017. Fraser started appearing at fan conventions, where he was met with overwhelming love and support. Videos of him tearing up at the warm reception from fans went viral. People began to realize how much they'd missed him, how unfairly he seemed to have been treated. Social media played a crucial role in rehabilitating Fraser's image. The hashtag #SaveBrendanFraser started trending. Fans began to dig deeper into his disappearance from Hollywood, and some started to piece together the truth about what had really happened to him. Then came the breakthrough that changed everything. In 2018, Fraser finally found the courage to tell his story publicly in an interview with GQ magazine. For the first time, he revealed the sexual assault, the depression, the physical ailments, the financial struggles, all of it. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Industry professionals who had worked with Fraser came forward to defend him, describing him as one of the kindest, most professional actors they'd ever worked with. Fans rallied around him even harder. And most importantly, casting directors and filmmakers started to really see him again. The comeback wasn't immediate. Nothing in Hollywood ever is, but roles started trickling in. Better roles. More substantial parts. Fraser appeared in films like Trust and The Affair, reminding people of his incredible range as an actor. But the real vindication came when Darren Aronofsky cast him in The Whale. This wasn't a nostalgia play or a pity casting. This was a serious filmmaker recognizing that Brendan Fraser was still one of our most gifted actors, capable of carrying a demanding, emotionally complex film. When The Whale premiered at the Venice Film Festival, something magical happened. Fraser received a 6-minute standing ovation. 6 minutes. He stood there, tears streaming down his face, as an entire theater of industry professionals acknowledged not just his performance, but his journey, his survival. The performance earned him an Academy Award for Best Actor, a recognition that felt like Hollywood's way of saying sorry, of acknowledging that they had failed him. But here's the thing about Fraser's story that makes it so powerful. It's not really about Hollywood redemption. It's about human resilience. It's about a man who was systematically destroyed by an industry, who lost everything, who was left broken and forgotten, and who somehow found the strength to keep going. Think about what Fraser endured. Sexual assault, career sabotage, financial ruin, physical deterioration, personal humiliation, depression, a decade of professional exile. Any one of these things could have destroyed a person. Fraser faced all of them simultaneously, and he survived. He survived because of his children, whom he was determined to provide for despite everything. He survived because of the few friends who stuck by him when it would have been easier to walk away. He survived because somewhere inside, that spark that made him a star, that fundamental decency and warmth, never quite went out. And maybe, just maybe, he survived because he knew that his story mattered. That staying silent about abuse only helps the abusers. That someone had to be willing to pay the price for speaking truth to power, even if that price was devastating. Fraser's story is a mirror held up to Hollywood's darkest impulses. It shows us how the industry protects predators and punishes victims. How power structures operate to silence dissent. How careers can be destroyed not by lack of talent or public appeal, but by the whims of influential people who face no oversight or accountability. But it's also a story of hope, because Fraser's comeback proves that talent will eventually find a way, that audiences can see through industry politics to recognize authentic humanity, that sometimes, just sometimes, the good guys do win in the end. Philip Burke, by the way, was finally expelled from the Hollywood Foreign Press Association in 2021, not for assaulting Fraser, but for sharing a racist article. It took 18 years and a completely different scandal for him to face any consequences at all. That tells you everything you need to know about Hollywood's priorities. Fraser's victory at the Oscars wasn't just personal triumph. It was a repudiation of everyone who tried to destroy him. It was proof that you can't keep a truly great actor down forever. It was Hollywood's admission that they had been wrong about Brendan Fraser all along. But the real victory isn't the awards or the comeback roles or even the renewed fame. The real victory is that Fraser survived, that he's still here, still acting, still bringing that incredible warmth and humanity to his performances, that he refused to let the people who hurt him win. Today, Fraser is exactly where he should be, recognized as one of our finest actors, celebrated for his resilience, and finally free to tell his story on his own terms. He's remarried, he's healthy, and he's working on projects that excite him rather than just paying the bills. The blacklist is over. The silence has been broken. And Brendan Fraser has reclaimed his place in Hollywood, not as the action star he once was, but as something even better, a survivor, an inspiration, and proof that the truth, however long delayed, will eventually come to light. His story reminds us that behind every celebrity scandal, every career implosion, every Hollywood mystery, There are real human beings dealing with real pain. Fraser's decade in the wilderness wasn't a cautionary tale about fame or fortune. It was a horror story about abuse and power, dressed up as industry gossip. But it's also a love story. Love for the craft of acting, love for family, and ultimately, love for himself. Because that's what survival really is. Refusing to let other people's cruelty define your worth. Brendan Fraser didn't just come back from Hollywood oblivion. He came back from something much darker, the systematic attempt to erase him entirely. And in doing so, he's given hope to every other person who's been silenced, blacklisted, or broken by people in power. That standing ovation in Venice? Those tears at the Oscars? That's not just Hollywood celebrating Brendan Fraser. That's humanity celebrating the triumph of decency over cruelty, of truth over power, of survival over destruction. And that, more than any movie role or award, is the real magic of Brendan Fraser's story. What do you think about Fraser's incredible journey from blacklist to Oscar winner? Have you been following his comeback? Or did this story reveal things you never knew about what really happened to him? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I love hearing your perspectives on these Hollywood deep dives. And if you found this story as compelling as I did, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more untold stories from behind the glitter and glamour of Tinseltown. We're just getting started uncovering the truth about your favorite stars. And trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next.